Dear Hector, the only way to arrive in Africa is the way the great explorers of history did, by boat. For centuries they sailed here where the Atlantic meets the Indian Ocean off the southern tip of Africa, hoping to find a quick route to India. And that's why it's called the Cape of Good Hope. In 1652, one Jan van Riebeck from the Dutch East India Company decided to set up a few shops and stores here to serve the passing ships, and Cape Town was born. So here's one of me heading for port full of good hope for a culinary adventure under the African sun.
Nothing quite like making life really difficult for yourself on an ocean-going yacht, probably, I don't know, coming from Rio de Janeiro to Cape Town or wherever we are, I've got no idea. So instead of opening a tin of corned beef and a tin of baked beans, heating it up, I thought I'd open a bottle of champagne and cheer myself up. Local South African champagne, very nice stuff indeed. And I thought, what a nice idea it would be to cook a few mussels. There's a pot of wine boiling away on my gimbaled stove. So into the gimbaled stove, we'll add a sprig, if you can come on round here. Just push him forward, don't worry about that. Some parsley into there, stay with it if you like, on backwards and forwards. We could have done this in the harbour, but we're not like that. We like to make life really, really awkward. Some thyme and some garlic into there as well. Good fun, Chris, isn't it? Point the camera properly, dear. A few peppercorns, go into there as well. And a few finely chopped onions go in. This truly is moule marinière in the best sense of the tradition. And then, if you can get someone to hold my glass, thank you very much indeed, I'll just pop these wonderful Cape mussels into the pot. The reason this sequence is so ragged is that I'm having to direct it myself because the poor old director is over the side of the boat, leaving his breakfast and last night's curry into the Indian Ocean, or the Atlantic Ocean, or wherever it is we actually are at the moment. So, when this swings back a little bit, we're going to have a loving close-up on the mussels in white wine, butter, parsley, garlic, and to make it sensationally good, we're going to add a drop of champagne as well. In fact, quite a nice drop of champagne. Close as you can get to that, and to the body. This is wonderful fun. Okay, the lid goes on, they bubble away till the shell's open. And because my glass has crashed in this gale and broken, I'm going to drink out of the bottle. Fun, isn't it?
It's got to be one of the most famous landmarks for sailors anywhere in the world, Table Mountain. But I bet you that very few of those ancient mariners had the benefit of a fine dish of moule marinière to warm the cockles of their hearts after a long voyage. Certainly, this lot seemed to enjoy it really well. A good sign, I must say. South Africans obviously like their food. So, South Africa was fast approaching dead ahead. Since those early Dutch settlers, Cape Town has developed into a huge cosmopolitan city. With its beautiful coastline and pleasant climate, it's now become the fashionable spot to live and work. It's the legislative capital of the country too, but apart from that, it's a bit like any seaside town. But never mind the fashionable bit, I was keen to get straight to where the real action is, the township. Townships like this one at Kailicha, on the outskirts of Cape Town, exist all over South Africa. No one knows how many people live in these places. It's impossible to carry out a census, but it runs into many, many millions of Africans. They come here from country areas looking for work, but unemployment is high and most of them end up scraping a living as best they can. Their homes are built of anything that comes to hand, corrugated iron, bits of old cardboard and sacking. But somehow they survive and there's a great sense of community. It's part of the South African dream that all this will improve and everyone will get a better place to live. But that's not going to happen overnight, and in the meantime everyone tries to make the best of life and has high hopes for the future for the next generation. For the men in Kailicha, like so many men elsewhere, life centres around the pub, or or as they call it here, the shebeen.
So, welcome to 707, which is a really cool spot here in the township, one of the biggest townships, by the way, and its English name is New Home, so welcome to New Home. Anyway, my latest chums here didn't feel like going to work today, they didn't have much to do anyway, and they also said they have never seen a man cook before, so they're here out of sheer curiosity and for a few beers. Anyway, they like things like pork and greens, so I got some pork and some vegetables, some onions, some spices, and a load of greens. These are from chard, or blet, as they're called, sometimes. And also, by the way, sorry, Chris, I got little stalks to go with it as well. So put into my wonderful wok machine, put a load of oil, and the first thing we're going to do is fry the pork. While that's browning, incidentally, if I look a bit pale or green or something this morning, it's not because I had a late one last night at all, definitely not. It's because there's a funny green Perspex roof here. As the pork begins to take some colour, we'll add these big pieces of onion. Now, we'll chuck in a load of cloves of garlic. And some whole peppercorns. And some coriander seeds, cloves, and some cinnamon. Then we'll pop in a bit of star anise. And a couple of bay leaves. And then we'll stir in some celery and some leeks. All while still being fried. The whole part of this dish is to fry and fry and fry. We add liquids and stocks later. That all goes into there.
I'm also adding some fresh green peppers, some dried red chilies, and some coarsely cut parsley and fresh thyme.
Then we add a load of masala, red masala powder. Then into that I add a little vegetable stock. These vegetables here, which are going to go in at the very end, I've already part-boiled just to cut down the cooking time, so the juice I cook them in makes excellent stock for the pork. That has to simmer away till it's all cooked, about 20 minutes or so, and then I'll prepare the greens.
While that's cooking, there's time for a bit of music from this wonderful band I've just found.
So I've added the carrots and the turnips, and now the squash and the parsnips go in. So last bit of all is just to cook the greens. The white bits of the greens, which doesn't make sense, they go in first. That's a small problem. Then the rest of the cabbage on top. Now we should have a small amount of fun, and we'll get a victim to try it and see if they like it or not.
It's always a bit nerve-wracking serving up new dishes to new chums. I'm never quite sure if my sort of cooking is going to appeal to different palates, but these chaps got stuck into it and seemed to really enjoy it. Pity though I couldn't get a verdict from their wives, but this shebeen is for men only, and they're not allowed in. I'm glad I started my Africa trip in a township. There aren't many modern facilities in these places. There's very little electricity. Running water is a rarity. So to cook, you have to go back to basics with charcoal burners and paraffin stoves. And that set the trend for the rest of my adventure. If I'm going to cook the local food, I'll do it the local way without all the fancy kitchen gadgets I have at home. I wanted to follow in the footsteps of another great explorer, Livingstone, who was the first white man to set eyes on the magnificent Victoria Falls. Happily, nowadays, there are luxury hotels for the intrepid explorer to stay in. The Victoria Falls Safari Lodge is where I pitched up, set in the middle of 160,000 acres of wild bushland on the banks of the Zambezi. I've always wondered how these wildlife programs are made, and I imagined the poor crew camped out in the bush for days on end. Why bother? They could book themselves into a place like this, pour a cooling beer, and wait for the animals to turn up on cue. Every day, this convenient waterhole attracts elephants, lions, all kinds of antelope, and these fine beasts. No danger of being attacked at this distance, which is just as well, as these buffalo have a reputation for turning nasty if they take a dislike to a chap. Hard to believe, really, as they look a bit like a herd of pedigree Aberdeen Angus having a cooling drink by the river.
Right, just open your legs, Keith. As you can see, it's a bit cosy.
Very cosy.
Before I left England, I told my new director, Mike, I do not like heights. So, what's the first thing he suggests? A microlight flight over the Victoria Falls. Livingstone looked at the falls and declared, on sights as beautiful as this, angels in their flight must have gazed. So they call this the Flight of Angels. But as far as I'm concerned, angels means heaven, and this looked like a quick way of getting there way before my time. I'm sure if Dr. David Livingstone had been alive today, he would have had to go at the microlight. But I wanted to see the place in the same way that he did. And that meant taking to the Zambezi River in a canoe. Livingstone was a dour Scotsman whose one great passion was missionary work in South Africa. But when he got there as a member of the London Missionary Society, he fell out with many of his colleagues, and so he and his wife set off on their own to set up missionary stations. On one of these trips, back in 1851, he saw the Zambezi River for the first time, and this must have whetted his appetite for exploration.
Hell of white water and waves with teeth like bananas. Brilliant.
Having discovered a route to the west coast, he set out to find an outlet to the east, and boarded a dugout canoe upriver from here, where he had heard the local Tonga tribesmen's tales about the magnificent natural phenomenon, the falls. But this is as far as he got by boat. The falls stood as a major obstacle in his way, and he stepped ashore here at what they call Livingstone Island. The locals called the falls the Smoke That Thunders, but Livingstone, being a patriotic chap, renamed them after his queen, Victoria. It's not all luxury on these trips, you know, and this tent was to be my home for a while. A bit worrying, since I'm told the occasional elephant has been known to pop across here for an evening meal, and the tent isn't exactly elephant-proof. The temperature is in the 90s, but I bet old Livingstone had a string of porters to keep him cool. Never mind, let's get on with some work.
I can remember from my history lessons and from my geography lessons at school hundreds and hundreds of years ago that the Victoria Falls are 1 mile wide, and it's a constant spray and spume and mistiness and a huge roar. Why is it when the Floyd program visits somewhere like the falls, it's shut? It's only down to a third of its normal size because there's been no rain for months and months and months. But the same thing happened to Dr. David Livingstone. When he came in here in November 1885, he'd heard from the local natives around the place that there was this thunder, this mist that thundered. And when he came here, he too was disappointed. But you have to admit, for all of that, all the falls, only half the falls, it is the most spectacular location. And to celebrate, as if by good fortune, I even caught a fish today. I'm going to cook it very, very simply, in fact, just in butter. And then back, sorry, Chris, I didn't say go down there. Thank you. It's not the fish that you need to learn how to cook, it's the way they cook cabbage around here, or rape greens, or any kind of spinachy kind of thing. they put a little bit of butter into their pot, and they add a load of tomato, a little bit of garlic, like so, and they stir it around. Just let that sweat down for a second. Chris, I need to chop an onion here. It's a long time since I've chopped an onion, but never mind. There we are. Right, back onto the pot. That goes in there. Of course, this business of cooking without water, I mistakenly thought for a moment in my naivety that they were very health conscious here. But that, of course, isn't the point. Water is at a premium, so if you can cook things without it, it's very logical, isn't it? Right, the next thing is these lovely greens, finely chopped, stalks and all, everything that's in there. Nothing here is wasted. This goes into the pot. A lot of it will blow away into the Victoria Falls, but it doesn't really matter. That goes into the pot, like so. We pass that to a willing assistant who's standing over there, thank you. And we just give that a stir round. Like that, and we put the lid tightly on. Okay, look at these super pots, aren't they great? Everything is used here. You're looking at that, Chris, this pot, thank you. It's just an old oil drum, or a little paint tin, punched with holes, little lid put in the middle, and it's a terrific cooker. Okay, that goes in there. We'll melt some butter into there, and we'll flop our little fillet of fish in. And even though we're on top of the Victoria Falls, we'll still add a little salt and pepper, as we should. This is tiger fish, by the way. Indigenous to the Zambezi. Back up to me, please, Chris. I'm giving you a fishing lesson. Tiger fish are absolutely amazing things, beautifully coloured. They fight like hell, and they've got jaws that clamp down like that. In fact, my manager Stan the other day caught one, and he lost it. He was fishing with a plug about that big, and the teeth went right through it. And the cheeky little buggers, they just hold it in their mouth, leaning the hooks out to one side. When they've had enough sport, they go, damn fish is gone. Anyway, I did manage to hook one this morning.
Good to see that Chris, my new cameraman, is getting these lovely big fat close-ups. Shame he's a vegetarian, though.
Now, if you have a general gaze at the falls for a moment or two, I'll just see how this cabbage is getting on. I'll add a little bit of garlic. So it's garlic, rape greens, or turnip tops, or pumpkin leaves, or spring cabbage, any kind of green that you like. And we'll add a little bit of pepper and salt. That's the salt. This is the classic way to do a Meunière sauce. Freshly melted butter with a little lemon juice and parsley. Slightly browned at the edges to give it that nutty flavour. Is then poured over the fish, like that, which is absolutely splendid. And then, as your excellent vegetable, let's wipe this nice and clean so it looks smart. And some splendid rape greens, tomato, and garlic. And this we shall call Tiger Fish Victoria Falls. Clichés, clichés, clichés. What do you expect?
This place, Hector, reminds me of that camping trip we went on. Do you remember? And it's really good to get back to nature and experience life without all those modern conveniences. Well, Livingston Island's a bit like that campsite, only a lot warmer.
Let's take a trip to Victoria. This time we'll look at the falls. Oh, the hills are alive. With the thunder of hippopotamuses.
And the end of my first day in the bush. Where else can you do your ablutions with a view like this? The last elephants I saw in the bathroom were pink ones. This is absolutely the real thing. I'm going to enjoy Africa. Those few glimpses of big game got me rather excited, so I'm off on safari to the Kruger National Park. It's about the size of Wales and is full of animals. The best way to cover all these vast distances is by plane. They use them like cars over here. Mind you, this chap doesn't look old enough to drive. Having cleared the landing strip of any marauding beasts, the intrepid traveller is whisked straight into the bush and back into a time when the whole of Africa was a giant game park. Not so very long ago, the only people to travel into the bush were big game hunters paying thousands of pounds to shoot the animals. Today's visitors just want to shoot them with cameras, not guns. And to get them close to the game, they need experienced rangers, like my latest chum, John. I was brought up on all those Armand and Michaela Dennis programs, where rhinos always ended up charging the camera car. But several generations of tourism and mass exploration has meant the animals are all used to us, even a bit blasé about the whole thing. This is called a white rhino, even if it's not actually white. Once they roamed freely across the continent, but now they're confined to the few game reserves where they're protected from poachers anxious to cut off their horns to sell as an aphrodisiac. The rhino prefers to use its horn for digging up bulbs, grass and other vegetation which provides it with a square meal. There are only about 4,000 of them left in South Africa now, which is why conservation is so important. The strange thing about these safari trips is that after a short while you forget that these are really wild animals. It's a bit like being in a big zoo with no bars. The rangers say it's terminally dangerous to step out of the vehicle, and they have no end of gruesome stories about foolish tourists who have met a sticky end by doing just that. Of course, it could be just to frighten you and add to the excitement, but I, for one, am not prepared to take the risk with this leopard. Particularly as she's heavily pregnant and guarding her lunch up a tree. Leopards are nature's epitome of single mums, as father disappears the moment he's put her in the family way. Life's tough in Africa. Running down the spine of South Africa are the Drakensberg Mountains, which tower up to 3,000 meters. This area is a playground for mountaineers, walkers, and general lovers of the great outdoors. Long ago, the Bushmen lived a happy Stone Age existence in these mountains, but they all fell prey to the advance of the new breed of settlers. One thing the settlers brought with them was a new industry, and that's what I'm off to see now. Struthio camillus, if you want to be scientific about it. Or ostrich to you and me. Ostrich farming has been going on in the Klein Karoo area for well over 100 years, and today there are approximately 300,000 of these strange-looking birds scurrying around the veldt. Originally they came from the Middle East, but ostriches are now extinct in that part of the world and nearly all of them are living here. They're the largest and strongest of all living birds, and as far as the farmer is concerned, they are big business.
Never, ever, ever, they said, work with animals and children. This director, this ex-director we just fired this morning, Mike Connors, got this brilliant idea of, no, we're not, Mike, seriously, surrounding me with ostriches. Now, ostriches do not bury their head in the sand, although I feel a bit like doing that because it seems a shame to invite them to lunch and then eat one of them. But that's precisely what we're going to do, because ostrich meat is, which is down here chopped up, by the way, Chris, is really good stuff. It's low in cholesterol, it's very flavoursome, it has a good gamey flavour. You can stir fry it, you can use it as steaks, you can casserole it, you can do what you like with it. And I'm simply going to make a casserole, using again my trusty wok. Onto the mighty burner there, which is really good. Ostriches are a really intensive crop because you can have the feathers for decoration, you can make jewelry from the shells from these things, you can use them as containers for your ingredients, and of course when you ask for half a dozen best free-range eggs, it takes on a whole different meaning here in South Africa because these contain the equivalent of 24 chickens' eggs. Anyway, enough of all of that. We've got some oil in there, we'll whack that right up. Onions go in next. Just brown the meat and the onions for a little while. Excuse me, can I have a little drop of wine? This is called ostrich wine. It's got your photo on the front. We'll have a glass of that while that's browning. I can see some complaints coming in here, ostriches around us, wildlife, animal rights and stuff like that. But I can assure you these things are beautifully reared. Even when they take their feathers from them, it's done in the most humane way. And of course, when they're ready for the table, at about 15 months, they're dispatched in the most humane way as well. We'll pop in some carrots and some little bits of bacon, because this meat is quite fat-less, so some nice pieces of fatty bacon really help with the flavour. Now, this stuff, which is like the rocket fuel of the 50s, is the local schnapps. And of course, they're very keen on that down here, and it's the perfect way to season the meat and flame it off before you add the... Oh, my goodness me. Hold on. It might all take off if we're not careful here. So you put a load of that in, and stand back, Chris, because it's going to go up like nobody's business. I hope. You've just nicked my water. I told you not to do that. Anyway, into that we pour a large bottle of red wine. A dollop of tomato puree. And just let it simmer away. You'd like a lightly fried egg for breakfast? This is the one for you. Quite a tricky operation. There's quite a big membrane just inside there. Of course, it looks as though I've committed the fatal error and already broken the yolk. But never mind. There's always a first time for everything. One egg. I think I do some daft things on this program, you know. This is really ridiculous. Trying to cook an ostrich egg in the middle of a field, deep in darkest, wonderful South Africa, where the wine flows happily and the smiles are frequent. But this is total madness. I can't bring myself to cook that thing, and I'm jolly well not going to, so there, I'm going to have a drink instead. Now is the time to add a few mushrooms into my ostrich au vin, and a wonderful boerewurst, which is made from ground pork, ostrich, and speck, and that just sits on the top and poaches in there for another, I don't know, 15 or 20 minutes or so. And then we'll have a really splendid, very warming kind of a dish for a winter's day, although in fact it's about 90 degrees. Lid back on. Ostriches have all come to have a snack.
And so another cooking sketch ends in total chaos as the birds fight back. My farmer chum Alex tells me that ostriches need to eat strange things like rocks, pebbles, spoons and wine bottles to help their digestion. Somehow, dear Hector, I can't help feeling that chicken farming would be a safer way of earning a living. As for the camera crew, they were unimpressed, and having traced away the birds, they turned that egg into a huge, delicious, massive omelette.